Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the 2018 Marine and Coastal District Small Grants Program Applicants Guidance Webinar. My name is Antoinette Clementson. I'm the Fisheries Specialist with New York Sea Grant, and I will be your facilitator for this webinar. Today, I'm accompanied by Ms. Jean Ann Johnson, who is a New York Sea Grant Fiscal Officer, and we also have Ms. Nancy Jones, who's our Administrative Assistant. I'd like to just mention to participants who are just joining us that you do not need to use your video. So if you could kindly just hit that camera icon and disable a video, we will be broadcasting. You just need to watch. Thank you. So the goal for this webinar is to try to convey information to assist interested parties to prepare and submit a complete application package to the Marine and Coastal District Research Board. But before we get into the heart of the matter, I would like to do some housekeeping, just especially for those who are using Zoom for the first time. If you are seeing this picture, this slide with a lovely turtle, and you're hearing me speak, then great, you managed to log in using our instructions. I just also would like to mention that all participants have been muted, and I'm not quite sure why I just got some sound coming through, but you're supposed to be muted, which means that when we do get to Q&A, which we will try to accommodate later on, you're going to be asked to use the chat feature of this web service. And in order to get that, what we do is we position our mouse on the page on your end, and you will see a little dialog pop up, and you just look for the icon that says chat. Once you click on that, you will see this going forward. I'm sorry. Yes, sorry about that. Yes. So once you click on the, we are getting some technical, oh yes. Yes, I'm sorry. Once you click on, in order to pull up the chat dialog, you're going to position your mouse on your screen in the Zoom window, and this dialog at the bottom that you see here on this slide, this should pop up, and you will just look for the chat icon. Once you click on that, you will see a dialog open to the left of the screen, and that's where you will enter your messages, your questions. Your questions, the way this is set up, all questions will come to me directly as the host. For those who are not able to use their computer, let's say they're just calling in and listening by phone, unfortunately, what you will need to do is email your questions to me afterwards, and I will certainly try to get to them and update the Q&A, the FAQ sheet that is available on the website. At the beginning of this webinar, I made sure to include the numbers that participants can use in case you're having audio difficulties. Sometimes our computer speakers are down, or for whatever reason. But if you are getting an image but you're not hearing sound, then the chat box should inform you, the numbers to call so you can listen via the telephone. This webinar is also being recorded for those of participants who've called and said they are unable to, to join us at this time. So we've arranged to have this webinar recorded, and we will have it posted on the website within 2 business days. And again, if you have, insurmountable technical difficulties and you have to leave, don't be disheartened. You can access the webinar within 2 business days. So I would like to start by giving some background to this grant because it is new, and the funding opportunity is established under New York State Environmental Conservation Law, Section 13-05 which is entitled the Marine and Coastal District of New York Conservation, Education, and Research Grants Program. This was established to address the need for public awareness education programs, the need to conduct research on marine and coastal district issues, the need to create educational and informational material publications, and also the need to establish programs to promote angling through training and information dissemination. Funding for this cycle was derived from the Marine Coastal District license plate, fondly referred to locally as the striped bass license plate. And you see the image there on the slide in front of you, which is displayed. So now I'd like to go into a little bit of the administration for this small grants program. Again, this is addressed through the legislation and under section 13-0503, which is entitled the Marine and Coastal District of New York Conservation, Education, and Research Board. Very long title, so we abbreviated by just referring to this board as the MCD board. It is a 3-member board. Each person is appointed respectively, one by New York State Senate, one by New York State Assembly, and the third position is appointed by the DEC Commissioner. This board has established and published bylaws which will govern the way they conduct themselves, the way they have meetings, frequency of meetings, and oversight of the small grant program, and so forth. So we've referred to the Marine and Coastal District several times, and I think we'd also like to spend just a quick minute to identify the geographic boundaries for this region, which includes waters under state and town regulatory authority. The region includes the ocean waters within 3 miles from the state's coastline, and that includes the Atlantic Ocean, Long Island Sound, and embayments. So on this diagram in front of you, or this figure, the Marine and Coastal District pretty much encompasses all that is included in that pink shading. So in addition to the area that I just mentioned, it also encompasses the tidal portion of the Hudson River south of the Tappan Zee Bridge. And lastly, it includes waters around Staten Island, specifically the west side of Arthur Kill up to the midpoint between New York and New Jersey. If you imagine, there's a line that runs down the middle of that river. So we're on the west side of that. And waters of Freshkill, off the Freshkill landfill in Staten Island. Now, the areas that are not included in this boundary, the boundary does not extend inland. So by that, I mean, the boundary does not come, let's say for Long Island, it doesn't extend inland. So if you have any lakes or rivers that are contained in this landmass, they're not included in Marine District. It only includes where there is the shoreline intercept for these other water bodies. If anyone has any uncertainties or questions about the project site as to whether it is indeed included in this region, they're always welcome to send us a quick email and we can try to address your concerns on a case-by-case basis. So move into the next slide. So I'd like to quickly review the goals for 2018. And for the program priorities, we have, well, the board has established 5 program priorities that needs to be addressed in this first round. And I'll just quickly read through the list that's in front of us here. Activities that would promote marine and coastal resources. The next priority is to have programs that or activities that will increase participation in marine sports fishing. programs and activities to increase public awareness and appreciation of marine and coastal resources. Also, activities or projects to encourage conservation of marine fisheries resources. And finally, programs or activities and projects to promote research to increase knowledge about the state's marine and coastal resources. Moving forward, the MCD board will be convening a technical review panel, which will be comprised of an extension and outreach professional, a representative from government agency, most likely the DEC, and one member who's been appointed to the MCD board. And the responsibilities for this technical review panel will be to evaluate each application based on 6 criteria. And these criteria are identified in the announcement, but I will, for the purpose of this webinar, go through them, just to read through them as stated in the announcement. The first criteria, it's demonstrated in the proposal, is the ability to address multiple program priorities that have been established by the DEC. And I just listed the 5 program priorities. This carries a maximum of 30 points. The next criteria is the anticipated impacts of the project, which is measured by the number of communities intercepted, the number of participants, the volunteer hours, acres restored, et cetera, that carries a maximum of 20 points. The ability to engage new and underrepresented audiences, which has been identified by the MCD board as being comprised of low-income households, minorities, senior citizens, veterans, and people of persons with disabilities, etc. This carries a maximum of 20 points. Projects should have an interactive and applied hands-on approaches to engagements. In other words, the board is looking for projects that will get people out to interact with fisheries and marine and coastal resources. That carries a maximum weight of 20 points. And projects that have multilingual or translations, that carries a maximum of 5 points. And last, by no means least, multidisciplinary partnerships carries a maximum weight of 5 points. Moving to our next slide. So, who is eligible to apply for this small grants program? Well, as identified in the announcement, this program is available to 501c3 not-for-profit entities physically located in New York. Now, obviously, these entities, when I say we, the board would like these entities to have some tangential relationship and interest with the topic. And the language that has been pulled from the law states that these organizations should have the general purpose of promoting sports fishing, increasing participation in recreational angling, increasing public awareness and appreciation of aquatic natural resources, encourage conservation of fisheries resources, or promote research relating to the Marine and Coastal District of New York. That's just the general language that was written in the legislation. So the types of group that the MCD board envisions that would meet this general criteria include your non-government organizations, K-9 through 12 educational institutions, which does not include universities, museums or nature centers and other outdoor educational type facilities, trade associations, community and civic groups, and marine-related fishing clubs, family and youth organizations, your guides, your scouts, your youth support programs, family centers, etc. And I would also like to note that municipalities, county, and other local governments are eligible to apply, although these agencies are not explicitly identified in the announcement. Moving to our next slide. And I'll encourage you, if anyone has questions as we go along, please remember you can use that chat dialogue to send them to me, and we'll try to pay attention and take them as we go along, or at the end of this presentation. So the next thing I would like to just address briefly is the whole issue of the organization's eligibility. And as I mentioned previously, the board has established that the 501c3, which is also written in the legislation, these are the eligible entities. And we've had questions from other interested parties about, well, I'm not a 501c3, we're considered a 501c4 or a 5 or a 6. And I guess we'd like to just clarify this in terms of eligibility. Well, for those who are not familiar with the corporation laws, the major difference with these various organizations is that they have the ability to conduct advocacy and political lobbying, and that restricts how this funding can be awarded. For Stony Brook University Research Foundation, which is going to be the ultimate authority that's right in the contracts, this entity is not allowed to contract with other groups besides the 501c3. For this small grant program, whether if you're a 5 or a 6 or a 4, you can participate as a co-project leader or a sub-recipient or award, sub-award, or a partner on the application. What we're saying, or what the board is saying, is that the 501c3 must be the party that is responsible for making the application and the request. And that would be the party that contracts with Stony Brook University Research Foundation. And this would be the contact for serving as the project liaison. I see there's a question, so I'm going to try to see if I can pull it up. A minute. Oops. Did I went forward. Just trying to get the chat box. Why isn't it coming up? Okay, sorry about that. So the question that came in is, are beach cleanups eligible to be funded under this program? And if my memory serves correct, I think yes, that was one of the activities that was identified in the announcement in terms of the types of projects that are sought. But I will also verify this later, and I can put an update on the FAQ section. But I want to say yes, this was one of the activities that was specifically mentioned in the call. And Jean-Ann is confirming that now. Which page is that, Jean-Ann? On page 2 of the announcement. Thank you. Okay, so what was I saying now? So just to reiterate, the 501c3, their role would be to act as the project leader. They would be the ones responsible for submitting the application, the request. They would be the one, if selected, will be contracted with Stony Brook University Research Foundation, and they will serve as the project liaison. Does not preclude the 501c4, 5, and 6, etc. to participate. What it does is it restricts how they're able to participate. And if anyone has questions afterwards, they can shoot me an email and I can try to deal with you on a one-on-one basis. Moving along. So now I would like to get into some general information about this funding opportunity. For this cycle, we do have about $100,000 available, and the grants are being issued as a cost reimbursable award, a CRA. And what does that mean? For people who are probably, this is the first time they're applying for a grant, a CRA means that the recipient, if you're selected, you do not receive a cash advance. Instead, what you're asked to do is submit invoices for reimbursement of the actual expenses that are spent. We do have Jean Ann here, who I will at some point later on turn over the podium, and she will speak a little bit more about these different accounting and administrative issues. And I do know that I've heard from several people in the industry their concerns about the turnaround time and cash flow. And Jean Ann will probably talk a little bit more about that when she addresses that part of the information webinar here. So to get back to this, awards are limited to up to $15,000. This doesn't mean that each request has to be $15,000. It can be less, but just bear in mind that the maximum amount that will be approved by the MCD board is no more than $15,000. Projects must be completed within 12 months, and applications must be received no later than November 16th, 2018 at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And all applications must be submitted via the web portal, and we'll get into that a little bit detail. And this is without any exception. I'd like to speak a little bit about the cost that you're allowed to request. And in your announcement on page 3, there is a detailed list of eligible and ineligible costs. But what I would like to do at this time is just to spend the next few minutes focusing our attention on expenses that are not covered and cannot be claimed. Ineligible costs includes things like if, and I need to make the caveat that there might be some projects that require getting a permit or a license. Now, if that is relevant for your case as an applicant, please be aware that the cost of the permit is an eligible cost. You can claim it in your budget. However, if there are any other fees associated with getting the permit, in other words, there's an application fee for the permit, or there's an administrative fee associated with the permit, those types of additional expenses are not eligible and cannot be claimed. However, the actual cost of the permit is an allowable cost. I'd just like to make that distinction. Another fee that might come up are those associated with legal services. These fees are not eligible. Expenses incurred prior to your project approval and start date are also not eligible. Sales and use tax are not eligible. You cannot use these funds to defray outside funding. In other words, you cannot use the small grant funds if you are approved for funding. You cannot use that as a match for other projects and asks. And lastly, by no means least, salaries and wage for permanent and seasonal staff are not eligible. Moving along. I'd like to now turn our attention to the application package, and just to maybe introduce us to the web portal part of submitting your application. So next slide. You will be asked as an applicant to prepare a package and upload it to our website. Now, I should emphasize that what is required is a complete application package. And what are the documents that constitutes a complete application package? We have 3 components. There is an application form. There are the CVs of the program, the project leader, and the co-project leader only, and the CVs are limited to 1 page per person. And there is the letter of support, which is limited to 3 letters of support per application. An incomplete application will not be accepted for review, even if it is received before the deadline. The board has created a checklist, and I will get to that momentarily, which is meant to be a tool to assist applicants to ensure that all documents have been completed. And when you do submit, you are indeed submitting a complete package. As an interested party, you are encouraged to use the application form that is available on our website. Now, if an applicant chooses to use an alternate format, please remember to follow the proposal format guidelines, which are listed, identified on pages 3 to 5 of the announcement. Moving along. I'd like to use the next few minutes just to talk a little bit about this application form, which was specially prepared for our small grants program. So what you have in front of you is an image showing the first page of this application form. This application form is available as a fill-in PDF format. You can download it from this Marine and Coastal District Small Grants Program website. It is recommended that you use Adobe Acrobat Reader to prepare this document. And this software, as many of you know, is available as a free download. And I've included the URL here on the slide, or you can do a quick Google search and that will take you to the website where you can update your existing version of Acrobat Reader or download the latest version. Although an applicant can use another Adobe Acrobat software, some of us have DC, which allows the DC version, which allows authoring. You can use those alternate versions to complete the forms, but you will notice that you are not able to access the features that have been built into this form, which we will get into momentarily. Now, time constraints will not allow me to review all pages of this application form, but if you're using Acrobat Reader, when you open the document, it's going to look very similar to the image you have here, where you have a header. It's either purple or green in some cases, depending on the version of the reader that you're working with. But that header information simply advises the users that you're working with an interactive document which contains fields for you to enter your information. So the first page, when you open this file, you will see the checklist that I referred to, which you can use to ensure that you've completed all forms that comprises the application package. So as you get into this application form, you'll notice several things. If you're using Adobe Acrobat Reader, which I'm going to presume applicants are using, the first thing that's going to be very obvious is that certain sections you will notice has these red frame or windows, bound in where you put in data. Now, what this means is that where you see a red frame, it is mandatory, meaning you absolutely must include that information. You'll also notice as you work with these fields, and in some places we do actually tell you that there is a limit on the number of characters that may be entered. So this means you should choose your words wisely. We're trying to keep this process as simplified as possible for applicants. Now, another thing that you can do with this form is you can use mouse over, which simply means that you position your cursor over a section, and what happens is that when you position your mouse over these sections, a box will pop up which contains the tips. Please pay attention to these tips, which describe the type of information that's being requested for you to input in these sections. As you move along, you will also notice that certain fields have been designed to automatically copy text to sections on subsequent pages in the document. This action is an attempt to reduce the effort on your part, and it is not the same as autofill for those of us who are experienced using a PDF form. What we do ask is that you do not change information that is automatically being copied. If you have to make changes, please go back to the source of that information where you first enter it and make the changes there, and it will carry forward to the subsequent pages. As I said, I'm not going to review every page in the application form in this webinar, but you are encouraged to read the announcement and again, pay attention to the tips that have been embedded in the application form. Move into the next slide. What I'd like to turn our attention to is the special features that are contained in the budget justification section of this application. Now, you use the budget justification to itemize costs and expenses that are associated with your project. Itemized costs must be related to the activities and methods described in the application form and also in the timeline. These are all sections in the application form. Now, I'd like to point out some special features in this section of the application form. You will notice here where I've indicated the red arrows, subtotals and totals are automatically generated. They're automatically calculated, and the values are actually carried forward to the Sea Grant Budget Form 90-4, which we're going to talk about momentarily. Now, again, please do not change any values that are automatically generated. That's where we have these red arrows. I'd also like to turn your attention to the types of expenses that are allowed for each category, and we try to be helpful and give just a little example for each category, what types of expenses you can itemize. I'd also like to mention that for the categories that are here, where we have the blue arrows pointing, these are the same when a successful applicant, so if you're selected, you'll be asked to prepare some administrative reports, and you're going to find that these are the same categories that you're reporting to. So we're trying to be consistent. Move into the next slide. Still on the justification, one thing that I would like to point out is, and I don't know how many of us this is applicable for, but in some places, some organizations, there is this expense that's referred to as indirect costs or administrative fee. IDC and NAF are the acronyms we use. For the purpose of this grant, these terms are synonymous. However, they are not the same. They do have different meanings. Usually, an applicant who claims the IDC, the indirect costs, that expense, this applicant's organization must have a written agreement with Stony Brook University in order to claim this cost. Usually the IDC is expressed as a percentage. The administrative fee, it's usually a flat amount for those organizations that do use this cost. And again, it has to be documented within the applicant's organization. Now, for the purpose of this small grant program, the IDC or administrative fee, they are each capped at 18%. They cannot exceed more than 18% of the amount being requested without exception. Now, when you are using, if you have to claim either one of these costs on this form, and I'll start with the IDC, the value has to, the way the form is set up, whatever you enter, you cannot enter, you're only allowed to enter between 0 and 0.1 in this box here. I'm sorry, I skipped over. In this box here by the arrow. So as an example, let's say an applicant for their organization, they have a 12% IDC. Then the value that they enter, they will take that 12 divided by 100, and then they will get the answer of 0.12. They will then enter 0.12 on the form. Now, for the administrative fee, we ask that you itemize this in the category for other costs. Again, if anyone has any questions, they're always free to reach out to us, and we can try to deal with you one-on-one on a case-by-case basis. So now, I would like to move to the heart of the matter, which is the Sea Grant Budget Form 90-4. Now, as I mentioned previously, there's fields that are automatically carried forward. And when you get to this form, you'll notice that it's practically almost complete. And you're thankful for that. The fields have been automatically copied from your budget justification. Again, users should not change these values, but we do ask that you provide some very minimal information that's denoted by the red arrows. You probably just have to put in project team collaborators if there are any, and elaborate about the personnel costs. As a reminder, the total project budget should not exceed $15,000. It can be less, but it cannot go over $15,000. And if you go on the website, there is an example of a form that has been completed if you click under the related links section. And we're moving along. Okay, so let's assume that you've prepared your application form and all your supporting documents are complete, and you're getting ready now to submit your application package at the web portal. You go to the URL, which is listed here, www.nysdproposal.org/. When you go there, you will click Apply Now. And what that does, it's going to take you into the portal, the application portal. When you get to this section, the form will look something similar to this. It might be a little bit different. If anything, it's going to be more simplified. But this is, one version that you might see. Now, again, I must emphasize that all applications must be submitted through the web portal within the deadline without exceptions. When you open this form, you will notice a couple of things. Most obvious will be at the top of the page, there'll be some information. Here, you will have a clock and a date stamp. The clock counts down the amount of time remaining until the deadline. Now, for this form, the applicant is going to enter very basic information. Again, before you get to this point, I must emphasize the value and the importance of ensuring that all your supporting documents are complete and you're ready to go. So again, your complete application package includes the application form that has been completed, the CVs for the project leader and co-project leader only, limited to 1 page, and your letters of support, which is limited to 3 per application. If you have this and you're ready to go, then what you will do is just enter some very basic information about the principal investigator or the project leader. It's the same person. Contact information, the name of the person. You'll also ask about the proposal itself. You will give the title of the proposal and the amount being requested. And again, this is a 1-year project, so you're only asking for funds for year 1, if it's still there. If there are other years on the form, then you put 0. There are no match requirements, so you're going to put 0 for those fields. Now, once you've completed the contact information, then you're ready to submit the attachments for the application. So what you will do is you will go to the Files Browse button, click on that link, and that will take you to your own computer hard drive. You will locate where your files are saved, which, as we know, it's a personal thing, so you will know where to look on your hard drive to find the files. Once you locate those files, you will click and they will automatically be uploaded. When you select your files and they're uploaded, you will see a list here that gives you all the files that you have uploaded, from your computer. The next step, again, I would urge everyone who's applying to just verify that all your files are there. Once all your files have been uploaded and you're confident that you're ready to go, then you will hit the submit button, and that will take you to another page. So this is the last part of the application submission. You will get this page that gives you a confirmation summarizing all the information you put in previously. And you will also have a timestamp at the top showing what time you submitted, etc. And at the bottom, you have an option to print a copy of this information and keep it for your records. Moving along. So for those who might be using our website, web portal for the first time, or even submitting a grant for the first time, we do have a couple of tips that we would like to offer, hopefully to help you with this process. The first thing I would like to say is don't wait until the last minute, because heavy traffic does slow down the server sometimes, and you don't want to be there in the last 2 minutes and see the clock running out, and then before you know it, because the computer is just still scrolling, you're out of time. So give yourselves time to do this, not rushing. And also, in case you should make any mistakes, then you have time to correct your mistakes. And by mistakes, the most common mistakes that we've encountered occurs when an applicant either forgets to include a document or they submit an older version. Now, if you should experience any one of these issues, please, and it's before the deadline, please do not panic. If you are within that deadline and there's still time, you can correct it. What you need to do is you will resubmit the complete package, start all over, and don't be concerned about having multiple packages up there on the server, because what happens is that when Sea Grant pulls the information, the files down, we will work with the last application that was submitted. The important thing is giving yourself time for correcting the errors. So try to get there before the deadline, because once that clock stops, you cannot submit any more applications. So before I turn this over to Jean-Ann, I'd just like to review some important dates that are coming up. November 16th, 4:30 p.m. That is the deadline for receiving applications. Once that is completed, then the next step will be for the board to undertake the review. Unfortunately, we do have some holidays coming up, so that kind of extends us unusually for this cycle. But we do anticipate, if this goes according to schedule, that the board will have the decision completed by the week of January 7, 2019. And then that's the week we will be sending out the selection and rejection letters. Once a recipient receives a selection a letter of approval, then Ms. Jean-Ann is going to be speaking with them and working with them more closely, because we have to make arrangements to issue the awards. But what we do hope is that with this internal process, that projects will be ready to start on March 1st, 2019. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jean-Ann to speak a little bit about what to expect when, after you receive a letter saying that you've been accepted for an award. Jean-Ann?
Once you receive your letter, I will send you a bunch of forms to fill out that I need returned. I'll need the W-9 form returned. I'll need a subrecipient commitment form returned, which asks for audit statements, and we can go over that if you're selected. It's not as daunting as it sounds. It's a bunch of yes, no boxes, and if any of those apply to you, you just give me the forms that it's asking for. If you have any human subjects or animal subjects, you have to go through some additional details, but I don't think anything is going to pertain to that. So you have to give me your workers' compensation, proof of liability insurance, any permits and licenses that you had to obtain, Any access rights, we need letters saying that you're allowed on the property. And then once we get everything and I send the contract to you, the faster that you can have it signed and returned to me, the faster that we can get your award out to you. I just want to remind you that 15,000 cap includes the 18% IDC. Don't write the budget for 15,000 and then add the IDC, because then you're going to be over the cap. Everything's cost reimbursable, like Antoinette said. The 3/1/19 start date is what we're going to put for all of them. They cannot go past 2/28/20. I'm sure some of them will be much shorter than that, and we'll wrap them up accordingly. And if anyone has any questions, I'm available to go through your budgets individually. Antoinette will provide some contact information.
Gina, one question that or concern that was raised is for the cost reimbursable awards when you get in, submit an invoice, what kind of turnaround time do you envision for the university to process and like cut the checks to return to candidates? Approximately a month?
It should be less than a month.
Thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Jeanne?
No. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, so we do have a few minutes left, about 10 minutes or 12 minutes or so. We can take a few questions, and just as a reminder, you can use your chat link that's available when you scroll over at the bottom of the Zoom window. And for participants on the telephone, unfortunately, if you're only using the telephone to listen and you don't have a computer, then you would have to email those questions to me afterwards, and I will certainly try to update the FAQ and also directly respond to you. So I do have Carl on the line. Yes, I can see you. I'm going to try to start at the top here. Okay. So all of your questions are coming to me directly as the host. So I'm going to just humor me as I go through it from the top and come down. We answered the question about beach cleanup. So we have one. Can you clarify whether 501c3s that have programs related to coastal resources but have a broader general purpose, that is wildlife conservation, New York City, would be qualified to apply? Well, I would say it really depends on the type of project. Again, you need to bear in mind the priorities that have been established. I think the idea behind the board is to have projects that would connect users to the marine resources. Again, by marine, we mean coastal, but also bearing in mind that there is the interest with angling, promoting angling, etc. So I'm sorry, it's not answering the question, but it really is going to depend on the project that comes about. And if you have other, you need more information, you can always speak to me, email me directly. So the other question we have is, can or should contractors who are working on the project be listed as participants? Leaders will be C3s, but contractor is a business. So by contractor, I think we're also referring to a subaward, if I'm correct. So who are working on be listed as participants. They can be listed as a participant as far as I'm aware. Again, you as a 501c3 and the lead, you're allowed to do subawards. Stony Brook does not get involved with that part of it because at the end of the day, all that Stony Brook asks for reporting is for the 501c3 to report to them directly. And again, when you look on the budget justification and the breakdown, you can identify that so-and-so, whether it's an organization or individual, they're a subaward. Okay. Second question, again, about 501c3. For 501c3 organizations that have few financial resources, do you have any suggestions as to how they can proceed since it is cost reimbursable? In other words, they have little money to spend up front. Yes, so that's the issue of cash flow. And that is an issue that several entities have raised. Unfortunately, there isn't much that we can do now. We cannot do like an advance.
I can't do an advance. If you need something specific from a vendor that's on the state contract, I could purchase it for you, depending on what it is.
Okay. So again, it's like getting into the weeds, and I don't mean to dismiss this question because, like I said, it is a concern that has been raised. I think the best answer is if you're selected, we can work with you on a case-by-case basis. And as Jean-Ann suggested, if it's like a big cost, maybe they could do it directly here from the university. Is that correct, Jean-Ann?
Yes.
Okay. So another question, I see that the grant cannot pay for permanent or seasonal workers. Can it pay for contracts, contractual employees? Well, the issue was one with wages was that the board didn't want to get involved with fringe benefits. As a compromise, I guess is the best word, there is the allowance to have honorariums or stipends. So it doesn't matter whether the stipends and honorariums are paid to staff, seasonal, contractual, you're allowed to do that. It's just that you cannot claim like a salary. That's the best I can offer right now. And if you need additional clarification, you can always, reach out to me and I'll try to, walk you through that. Another question, assuming contractors would go under other costs. Is that correct,
Yes.
Jean-Ann? Yes. Okay, another question. I'm confused about the budget lines for personnel since salaries are not covered by this grant. Can stipends be provided for salary? I just answered that. Yes, you can have stipends for seasonal permanent staff, doesn't matter. Like I said, the issue with the board was that the concern was that getting involved with salaries that would also include fringe benefits, and then that, for this small grant, just was beyond the scope. Can stipends be provided for salaries? So I would say both, doesn't matter. Another question, when would you expect awards to start? Need this for calculating the timeline section. So I think we said March 1st. Yes. And realistically, I don't think, given the holidays that anyone's going to be starting any earlier. I think, but I could be wrong. And if that's the case, we'll try to be flexible and work with individuals on a case-by-case basis. But I think the latest start date we're looking at, well, not the latest, but I don't know what to say, but call us and we'll try to work with you on a case-by-case basis. But realistically, the way the holidays and everything, falls out, we're looking at March 1st as the start date. Going down, trying to get as many as I can. Do you need to have the most recent audit to submit an application, Jean-Ann?
Yes.
Yes. Can you please go over the point system again? Oh, okay. Let me go back. Let's go back to that one, the points. Okay. How are we doing for time? We have 5 minutes left. Okay, the point system. So again, these are the criteria for evaluating the proposal, the applications. The first is the ability, let me find my, oh here, I'm sorry. Easier to read from my form. Okay, so the first is the ability to address multiple program priorities identified by the DEC. And these are the priorities that we mentioned here. I won't read them again in the interest of time. And that has a maximum of 30 points. Now, this information, it is contained in the announcement. The next criteria is the anticipated impacts. And impacts are measured by the number of communities that are involved in your project, number of people, participants, the volunteer hours, if you're doing restoration or cleanups, how many acres, et cetera, et cetera. That carries a maximum of 20 points. The ability to engage new and underrepresented audiences. And for this board, they have identified low-income households, minorities, senior citizens, veterans, persons of disabilities, et cetera, et cetera. That carries a maximum of 20 points. Interactive, applied, and hands-on approaches for engagement in the project, that carries 20 points. Translation and multilingual, some people will, if they're doing signage or publications, they might do more than one languages. That's a maximum of 5 points. And multidisciplinary partnerships, meaning that you're, as an application, you're bringing in other collaborators and partners. That carries a weight of 5 points. I'm going to try to get back to the chat box. Okay. Most audit. Oh, somebody was having problems hearing me? Oh, couldn't hear Jean Ann, I'm sorry. Okay, another question. In the project narrative section, the second to last point states that we have a strategy to promote the Marine and Coastal District license plate as part of the project. Yes, so please bear in mind that the source for this fund is the striped bass license plate, which I showed the icon earlier on. So that is not, that has a limited lifespan. In other words, what I mean is that in order for us to continue funding, we have to wait for that source to, that account to build up. It's taken us like 15 years to get to this point. We do plan to have 2 rounds of this small grant program. We're starting out with 100,000 for the first round. So the board thinks it would be kind of in our own self-interest to have more information and public awareness about the license plate, because the idea being that the more people who are aware of this plate's existence, they will buy into it and they will contribute to building up the funds that we can continue this grant program in the future. Now, what we're not asking for you as a program to go out there and say, go buy the license plate. That's not what we're doing. What we would like you to do is, as a part of your project, whether it's a publication, some of us use social media, come up with a strategy how you can help to spread the word, even if it's just to have a little sentence or, the board will have some standard canned language that you can use on your publications, or even just to spread it by social media. Hey, our project was funded through this special license plate. It's out there, it's now being used. So that's the general principle behind that. Another question about salaries. I'm sorry. A lot of questions here. Salaries are not eligible, but are honorary for project leaders. Yes, that was answered before. Are shorebird education programs eligible? Again, it depends on the project itself. If you're interacting with angler, it's very hard to say. And again, that decision ultimately would be with the board. It really comes down to the context and the content of the proposal. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that with a yes or no. Somebody missed the first few slides. Yes, you can get them. This broadcast is being recorded and you will have it available on the website by clicking the link that will be updated under related links, in 2 business days. Another question, is the one-page CV limited to single side or can, nope. So it's one page only, not double-sided, just one page. It's really just a synopsis of the project leader and the co-project leader. We don't need a lot of information on that. I think that's the last question. And what did some of us have CVs of many pages? Yes, yes, I understand that, but let's just give us the highlights, the really, really high points. Yes, because, and I say this because there are some applicants, this might be the very first time they're applying. So, for them, they might not be like, established and have like a long list of publications, but what they can talk about is some of the work that they've been involved with. So we want to keep this process as simplified as possible. And, even with the CVs and even the letters of support, it all adds up. So, this is really an attempt to try to make the work easier on the applicants. I think that's our last question, and I think it's now 1 minute past 3. So I would like to just go forward. There is one more slide that we had to display, and that's Jean Ann's, did questions. So our last slide has just some contact information. If anyone has questions about the MCD Small Grants Program, you're free to send those questions directly to me at aoc5@cornell.edu or use the number provided. These information are listed in the announcement. Question related to the application web portal, or if you're experiencing technical difficulties, you would want to contact Mr. Lane Smith or Paul Facazio at the addresses and information provided. And I think what I would like to say now is just to thank you all for participating in this webinar. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And I would like to wish you a good evening and a good weekend, and good luck with your application. And please remember that this webinar is recorded and it will be available on the website. Thank you and have a great day. We're gonna take time.